colleagues, there is a vote at 10:30, and conferring with the ranking member, we will recess at 10:30, reconvene at 10:45, so we can promptly get that vote done, and then there'll be a second vote later. Welcome to our witnesses. Good morning. The committee meets today to receive an update on the readiness and posture of U.S. Special Operations Command and U.S. Cybercommand. Our witnesses are Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Low-Intensity Conflict, Christopher Maier, Commander of U.S. Special Operations Command, General Richard Clarke, and Commander of U.S. Cyber Command, National Security Agency Director and Chief of the Central Security Service, General Paul Nakasone. I would note this is likely General Clarke's last appearance before the committee, and I would like to express my appreciation for your 38 years of service to the nation, including as the Commandant at West Point and Commanding General of the 82nd Airborne Division, but most importantly, 3rd Battalion, 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment. Thank you very much, sir. On behalf of the committee, I hope our witnesses will convey our appreciation to the men and women you represent and their families for their dedication and professionalism. For the first time since Congress reformed the responsibilities of the Assistant Secretary for Defense for Special Operations and Low-Intensity Conflict, or ASD SOLIC, more than 5 years ago, the office has, again for the first time, a Senate-confirmed Assistant Secretary and a full-time Director of the Secretariat for Special Operations, focused on the advocacy and oversight of Special Operations forces. These positions are critical to ensuring our Special Operations forces are trained, equipped, and organized to adequately support our national defense strategy. I appreciate the Department's efforts over the past year to institutionalize the role of the ASD SOLIC, but I remain concerned that the number and expertise of the personnel assigned to supporting the office's service secretary-like responsibilities continues to fall short of what is required. I hope the Department will prioritize and accelerate these hiring efforts in the coming months. The threat from violent extremist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, while diminished, remains real and will continue to require the sustained application of special operations capabilities that have been honed over the last 20 years. Additionally, long-term strategic competition with China and Russia, as well as the challenges posed by Iran and North Korea, increasingly require the tailored and often clandestine capabilities that only our Special Operations Forces can provide. Following our withdrawal from Afghanistan, the Special Operations community is at an inflection point. Assistant Secretary Maier, General Clarke, I look forward to an update regarding your efforts to focus and prepare our Special Operations Forces for the challenges ahead. In particular, I would ask that you discuss the capabilities we need to build an enduring advantage over our strategic competitors, how you are shaping the force of the future through recruiting, retention, and building a culture of accountability, and how you are addressing the unique challenges faced by Special Operations families. Turning to Cyber Command, General Nakasone, the commander of U.S. European Command, recently testified to the committee about his appreciation for the performance of your command and the National Security Agency prior to and during the Russian assault on Ukraine. Please convey our gratitude to the personnel under your command for their exceptional work. I also want to commend General Nakasone, the President and his staff, and the leaders of the intelligence community for the unprecedented and skillful release of intelligence over the last several months that exposed Russia's aggressive intentions and deceitful activities. Intelligence officials are understandably cautious about revealing hard-won insights on adversaries, but this current strategy has proven highly effective in strengthening the international community's response and creating dilemmas for Vladimir Putin. This is a great example of competing effectively in the information domain, and I hope we will continue to make this kind of creative use of intelligence information. General Nakasone, you have been working to mature the cyber force and advance its capabilities to conduct defensive, offensive, and supporting intelligence operations to counter our adversaries. I know that improving the readiness of our cyber mission forces is your highest priority. For you to succeed, however, the military services must increase their numbers of qualified and trained personnel for this mission set. Compounding this challenge, the private sector has realized the immense value of our highly skilled military cyber operators and is offering them very high compensation to leave the military. The services must adjust accordingly by providing a combination of incentives to retain these personnel. And I would note that Senators Manchin and Rounds are holding a cyber subcommittee hearing focused on this critical topic this afternoon, and I would welcome your thoughts on the issue. And again, I commend both Senators Manchin and Rounds for their forward-looking and insightful approach to the problem. Over the past several years, Cybercommand and the NSA, working jointly, have taken vigorous and sustained actions to defend our elections from foreign interference and malign influence operations. General Nakasone, with the 2022 midterm elections approaching, I would ask for your assessment of our election defense efforts, which you have described as an enduring, no-fail mission. Finally, I would note that, in accordance with changes in the global security environment and President Biden's heightened focus on the Indo-Pacific region, Cybercommand has shifted a task force to focus on competition with China and has created the China Outcomes Group under senior-level leadership. The work of these organizations will be of keen interest to the committee. I again want to thank the witnesses for their service and appearance before us today. I look forward to your testimony. Now let me recognize the ranking member, Senator Inhofe, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for welcoming our great witnesses. As I've said many times, we face a more dangerous and complex set of threats than at any time during my life. Just last week, Army Secretary Christine Wormuth said, quote, "This is probably the most dangerous security environment in her 25 years. Well, it's the same with me, except it's more than 25 years. The Chinese Communist Party announced a 7.1% defense budget increase this year, continuing 2 decades of historic military modernization. Every day they give us more evidence that their goals and interests are fundamentally opposed to ours. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has upended European security. North Korea is developing more capable ICBMs. Iran has accelerated its aggression, and terrorist groups are reconstituting Africa and Afghanistan. For our witnesses today, you face challenges across each of these threats. In addition to growing their conventional military capabilities, our adversaries are expanding their use of irregular warfare and cyber to threaten the United States and our partners. Still working through the recent released 2022 National Defense Strategy, but I've seen an extensive description of the gray zone and expansion and cyber threat posed by each of our adversaries. But I haven't seen much in this budget so far about responding to those threats. General Clarke, you have the daunting challenge of reoriented SOCOM for a high-end fight, even as you'll be stretched thin in shouldering the burden of the fight against terrorism. Like our Afghanistan withdrawal, I'm concerned we're taking too much risk there. Mitigating that risk will largely fall on you and your troops. General Nakasone, the pace of Chinese advance in cyber is pretty breathtaking, and our other adversaries are also moving fast. We want to make sure that we have the resources and authorities you need to maintain or regain your advantage. I definitely want us to do more in cyber cooperation with our allies and partners. So we'll have to look at funding for that this year also. I look to our witnesses to describe how the men and women they lead are postured to deal with this array of threats, and what this committee can do to ensure they have the tools necessary to be successful. So, Mr. Chairman, I thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Inhofe. Since a quorum is now present, I ask the committee to consider the following civilian nominees. The Honorable William A. LaPlante, Jr., to be Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, Mr. Eric K. Raven to be Undersecretary of the Navy, Ms. M. Tia Johnson to be a Judge of the United States Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces, and Dr. Marvin L. Adams to be Deputy Administrator for Defense Programs National Nuclear Security Administration. Is there a motion to favorably report these 4 nominations to the Senate? Is there a second? Second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. The motion carries. Thank you very much. Now, let me recognize Secretary Maier, and then I'll recognize General Clarke, and then General Nakasone. Mr. Secretary, please.
Sorry about that.
You might want to pull that as close as you can get to your, so some of us can't hear.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on the global posture of our nation's Special Operations Enterprise, or SOF. I am honored to testify alongside General Clarke and General Nakasone, 2 of our nation's most dedicated military professionals. On a personal note, and reinforcing, Chairman, what you said, I would like to thank General Clarke for his leadership and partnership during his tenure as SOCOM commander during a time of major transformation and strategic importance. I also appreciate the leadership of Command Chief Master Sergeant Greg Smith, who is here today. The dedication, service, and sacrifice of our SOF leaders and the SOF community motivates me each and every day to ensure we are doing all we can to provide them the ways and means to win, regardless of the challenge. I would also like to thank Congress, and particularly this committee, for its steadfast support for our SOF warriors and their families. Since the establishment of SOCOM, our strong partnership with Congress has been instrumental to fielding the world's most capable and elite special operations force. We continue to make progress in advancing Congress's intent to institutional role of the office I lead, the Special Operations and Low Intensity Conflict within the department, or SOLIC. Sustaining and enhancing the competitive advantage of the U.S. military, and even more broadly, the nation's capabilities in future fights, depends on our effectiveness to provide the civilian oversight and backing of the SOF enterprise. This group of extraordinary military, civilian, and contractors has proven itself over so many decades to be essential to the U.S. military and strategic success. In today's increasingly complex security environment, the SOF enterprise provides our nation's leaders with agile, scalable, and discrete options to address challenges across the spectrum of competition, crisis, and conflict. SOF play an essential role in the national defense strategy by holding adversary systems at risk and by enhancing our allies and partners' ability to resist aggression and malign influence. Even as we transform the SOF enterprise to meet the challenges of achieving enduring advantage through integrated deterrence and active campaigning, we continue to enhance our capabilities to conduct high-priority counterterrorism and crisis response operations. The President's FY23 budget request for SOF reflects these priorities in modernizing our maritime capabilities and investing in artificial intelligence and other key technologies. The budget also supports the Armed Overwatch program to ensure our SOF have the required support in remote and austere environments where they operate. As reflected in the FY23 budget, we continue to invest in the health and well-being of our SOF warriors and their families. Our flagship Preservation of the Force and Families program, or POTF, complements service-administered programs to address the unique physical, cognitive, psychological, and spiritual health needs of our SOF community. We continue to prioritize enhancing diversity inclusion within SOF. Drawing on a diverse set of talents and perspectives is essential to our success in a changing operational environment, and to SOF's unique ability to engage and collaborate with allies and partners around the world. The number of women in our ranks continues to grow, and in the past 2 years, the first 3 women have successfully completed Special Forces qualification, and last year, the first woman qualified as a Naval Special Warfare Combatant Crew member, or SWCC. We are proud of these warriors' individual achievements and continue to actively promote a career in SOF for all who meet our rigorous standards. Lastly, I would like to briefly mention the war in Ukraine. Among many observations, it serves as a daily reminder of the importance of building the capabilities and resilience of our allies and partners. As we watch the Ukrainians employ a number of elements of irregular warfare against a larger force to great effect, we should internalize the need to continue to grow our own irregular warfare skills and continue to develop and refine irregular warfare options for our nation's leaders. Mr. Chairman, thank you again for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Excuse me. General Clarke, please.
Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, and distinguished members of this committee, thank you for this opportunity. I am honored to testify alongside the Honorable Chris Maier and my good friend, General Paul Nakasone. Joining behind me is Chief Greg Smith, SOCOM Senior Enlisted Leader. This is Greg's final time appearing before this committee before he retires after 33 years in uniform. He is representative of the extraordinary women and men of U.S. SOCOM, and I am consistently grateful for his counsel. This April 16th, next week, marks 35 years since U.S. SOCOM was activated. We are thankful for the foresight and support of Congress, and particularly this committee and Senators Nunn and Cohen, who had the foresight to stand up U.S. SOCOM. Thank you for your decades of continued support ever since. Your Special Operations Forces create strategic, asymmetric advantages for the nation across the spectrum of conflict. U.S. SOCOM bolsters deterrence globally through our campaign activities, all providing critical options for the joint force. We are also innovating and modernizing to build enduring advantage while strengthening our force and family. Amid continual challenges to the rule-based international order, maintaining a range of credible options underpins our nation's strategic advantage. We have witnessed Russia's unprovoked and unjustified invasion of Ukraine, China's coercive and malign activity in the Indo-Pacific, and efforts by other state and non-state actors, including violent extremist organizations, to sow instability. In this dynamic environment, U.S. SOCOM's enduring value resides in our ability to combat asymmetric threats, particularly in the gray zone and below the threshold of armed conflict. We employ precision and surprise to both prevail and respond in crisis. And our formations support the resilience and resistance efforts of our allies and partners, often through sustained long-term partnership with their Special Operations Forces. Regardless of the threats we face, SOF represent a critical strategic hedge to respond in crisis. Exquisite, tailored capabilities enable for us to undertake sensitive and high-risk missions, crucial to safeguarding our citizens and protecting our vital national interest. A cornerstone of all of these efforts remain our longstanding partnership with ASD SOLIC. The oversight, policy guidance, and advocacy within the Department of Defense provided by ASD SOLIC are essential for the modernization, readiness, and well-being of our SOF and their families. Together, we are committed to sustaining trust by strengthening our culture of accountability. We are preparing for future threats by unlocking our nation's diverse talent, and we are leading with our values through our continual efforts to mitigate civilian harm. As we speak here today, more than 5,000 men and women from SOCOM are defending our nation and standing shoulder to shoulder with partners in over 80 countries worldwide. The courage and commitment of over 75,000 members of our Special Operations community are inspiring. As this may be my final opportunity before this committee, I would emphasize that it has been the honor of my lifetime to serve with them every day. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, General Clarke. General Nakasone, please.
Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, and distinguished members of the committee, I'm honored to testify beside Assistant Secretary Maier and General Rich Clarke. I'm joined today by Command Sergeant Major Cheryl Lyon, the U.S. Cybercommand, and NSA Senior Enlisted Leader. We are honored to represent the military and civilian members of U.S. Cybercommand. Command Sergeant Major Lyon and I want to recognize Rich Clarke and Greg Smith and their families for 36 and 30 years of dedicated service to our nation. Well done, gentlemen. Defending the nation is at the heart of U.S. Cybercommand's mission. The command has been integral to the nation's response to the current Russia-Ukraine crisis. We have provided intelligence on the growing threat, helped to warn government and industry to tighten security within critical infrastructure sectors, enhanced resilience of the DoD information network, accelerated efforts against criminal cyber enterprises, and together with interagency and allied partners, planned for a range of contingencies. Coordinating with the Ukrainians in an effort to help them harden their networks, U.S. Cybercommand deployed a hunt-forward team who sat side by side our partners to gain critical insights that have increased homeland defense for both the United States and Ukraine. U.S. Cybercommand views 2022 as a year of significant opportunity for building our capabilities as we pursue 5 priorities: readiness, operations and defense of the nation, integrated deterrence, recruitment, retention, and training, and the Joint Cyber Warfighter Architecture and Enhanced Budget Control. My goal is a command that remains world-class, ready and capable of providing options and conducting operations in defense of the nation with wider partnerships and exceptional talent. These elements will be essential to national security as our nation faces an array of adversaries who are expanding in scope, scale, and sophistication. Cybersecurity is national security. Speed, agility, and unity of effort brought about by the connected relationship between U.S. Cybercommand and the National Security Agency is the ingredient that protects the United States against our enemies. The men and women of United States Cybercommand are grateful for the support of this committee and Congress that you have given to our command. I look forward to answering your questions.
Well, thank you very much, General Nakasone. Before I begin, let me too commend Sergeant Major Greg Smith for his service. We all understand that the great advantage the United States military has are the NCOs and enlisted men, and thank you for your service. Secretary Maier, we over the past many years have been trying to create these service secretary-like posture with SOLIC. And as I indicated in my opening testimony, it seems to me you need additional resources and additional facilities. Can you give us an idea of what you need to be that service-like secretary?
Chairman, thanks for the question. And this committee, more than any other, I think has been a huge supporter of reinforcing the institutionalization of ASD SOLIC, so we very much appreciate that. Where I think we've made progress over the last year from the time I was last here testifying in front of you on institutionalizing the role of ASD SOLIC in the department with, frankly, a lot of advocacy personally from Secretary Austin. I think elements of the dual reporting structure that I am a big proponent of, where we report up one chain for policy and another chain for the service sec responsibilities, doesn't translate always well into the department. It just doesn't graft well on the blueprint. So that puts us at times at a disadvantage for competing for resources and some of the other aspects that we would need in a startup organization. I think your continued advocacy, your continued support for funding for staff, and as I think was highlighted in your opening remarks, the right mix of expertise and frankly senior expertise, where we're a small proportion as a ratio of senior executives who are having the responsibility to oversee many of the key aspects of the soft enterprise, and we're doing it with people who traditionally are at a lower rank, as just some of the key aspects that we continue to work with the department to reinforce, sir.
Thank you very much. General Clarke, from your perspective as the commander, can you indicate how valuable the role is of the SOLIC and what improvements you might suggest from the standpoint of a commanding officer?
Thanks for the question, Senator. First, it's great to have a confirmed nominee that has been consistent in the position. Mr. Maier now testified last year. Mr. Maier is the 7th ASD SOLIC, either confirmed or acting, that I've had. So the consistency for SOCOM is very important, but it's also important for those deputy assistant secretaries and the structure within. The other aspect that I would highlight, Senator, is that Mr. Maier now has a seat at the table with the other service secretaries that allow him to, one, provide advocacy for SOCOM structure and what we need to do in the future for the department, but also to provide that advocacy and insights as to what the Secretary is thinking. And that's everything from human resource to the Secretary's priorities. And that has been extremely valuable for this command, where sometimes we could be working more in the dark without Mr. Maier at the table. So thank you.
Thank you very much, General Clarke. I was going to ask questions, General Nakasone, about the need for talented personnel, but I think I will cede that to Senator Rounds and Senator Manchin today in anticipation of the hearing. But I do have a question about the Social Media Data Threat Analysis Center. We authorized that in the NDAAs of 2020 and 2021. Do you agree that it would be helpful to have such a center to provide ongoing analysis and trends, and also provide some deterrence, perhaps? Could you comment?
Chairman, I can. Based upon my experience watching 2 different election cycles and the work of our adversaries to attempt to garner greater influence, I think such a center would be helpful. Here's what the center really needs to do, though. It needs to be able to look at all of the full spectrum operations of what our adversary is doing. What are the tactics? What are the tradecraft? What are the procedures that they're doing? And I think the second piece is that what would probably be most helpful is this center being outside the government, federally funded research center, or perhaps another center that is obviously in support, that's able to attract the talent and remains very, very vibrant and dynamic in its approach.
Well, thank you very much. Again, gentlemen, thank you for your service. General Clarke, please give my regards to your father, who was my physical education instructor at West Point and passed me despite my inadequacies. Thank you very much. Senator Inhofe, please.
I enjoyed that. General Nakasone, it's clear the threats posed by our adversaries in cyberspace is growing. China is using cyber to steal our cutting-edge technologies, and Russia is using destructive cyber attacks in Ukraine and elsewhere to determine the United States and our partners. General Nakasone, in the face of these serious cyber threats, your stance has been consistent and it's been clear on the benefits of the dual hat arrangement. And, you know, the dual hat arrangement, for some reason, has become controversial, and I think you and I both agree on this. But why is it that that arrangement is the best in the national security interest of the United States? Explain that to us.
Senator, thank you for the question. I begin with just 2018, when I came into the job, both as commander of U.S. Cybercommand and the director of the National Security Agency, and I look at the change in terms of our national security today, in terms of what our adversaries in cyberspace are trying to do. We weren't thinking about ransomware in 2018. We weren't necessarily thinking about near peers in terms of their capabilities in 2018. Very, very focused on coming out of the 2016 elections, obviously the midterm elections of 2018, and then also being able to address a series of threats with counterterrorism. But over this past 4 years, as you've indicated, Senator, the world has changed considerably, and what we see is a speed, a sophistication, and a willingness for our adversaries to operate tremendously impactful within cyberspace. And so what we have done is to continue to mature the relationship between U.S. Cybercommand and NSA. How do we bring the best of what is being done in foreign intelligence and cybersecurity to the work that's being done on the command to be able to get after our adversaries? This is what changed. And so 1 + 1, we don't want it to equal 2. We wanted a force multiplier of 5 or 10 that can get after our adversaries. And we're not alone at this, Senator. Our adversaries are doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's a great response. China views Africa as key to its global ambitions, which is why they built their first overseas military base in Djibouti. And people don't realize that it's not just that military base in Djibouti. That was the first military base, period, in their history. And so they want to build another one in the west coast of Africa. Now, we witnessed this in Djibouti, and the bulk of the U.S. forces in Africa are special operations troops who work with our partners to build capabilities, collect intelligence, and push back on China, Russia, and terrorist groups. We should deploy more of these troops to Africa, given the growing threats that we have pointed out several times in Africa. General Clarke, what's your assessment of what the Chinese military seeks to accomplish in Africa, and what can our special operations forces do to confront these growing threats?
Senator, I've been to Djibouti many times and also see it as a strategic location, not just for Africa, but what it gives for a platform, for us to conduct counterterrorism missions into the Middle East with its proximity to Yemen. And our is a key strategic hub there. The Chinese clearly see the same thing. For U.S. Special Operations Command in support of AFRICOM, there it's to ensure that the violent extremist elements there are disrupted so they cannot cause a threat back to the United States. As far as our ability by being there really allows us to get to see and sense what the Chinese pernicious behavior is inside of Africa, with a great interest specifically in collecting resources and minerals for the future. And by being there, it helps us to highlight those for the partners with whom we work.
Well, and I'm glad that we have that opportunity. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Senator Gillibrand, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Nakasone, it's great to see you, and I just want to give my gratitude to all three witnesses today for their extraordinary service, especially General Clarke on your retirement. You've really been a bright light for many, many years, and we're grateful for everything you've done. General Nakasone, I've advocated for the need for a National Cyber and Digital Services Academy, which was consistent with the recommendations of the AI Commission to train the next generation of the civilian cyber workforce. This would serve as a complement to existing fellowship and scholarship programs. Looking forward, what are the key competencies that these pipelines should be developing? And second, and related, DHS is still in the pilot phase of their new DHS cybersecurity talent management system, where they seek to more quickly onboard 150 new cyber personnel outside of the traditional OPM process. Are there any early lessons that can be learned from this and helpful to the DoD in increasing civilian hiring?
So, Senator, I think the first lesson that we have to is we need the largest pool as possible. This is a critical piece of what our nation's going to do in the future. Cyberspace is where our nation stores its wealth and its treasure. And so as we take a look at that, being able to attract from broad ranges of our society that traditionally perhaps have not touched science, technology, engineering, and mathematics is an important first step. Secondly is focusing on some of the key competitive advantages our nation is going to need for the future. Data science, coding, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of these are capacities that our nation's going to need well into the future. And the third piece, I think, is just the ability to attract and to focus on the mission of what really gets done here. This is what we've learned at the National Security Agency and Cybercommand is it's the mission that attracts people to work in this field. Thank you.
Do you have any particular views on the development of the National Cyber and Digital Services Academy?
Senator, if I might, let me take that for the record just so I give a more fulsome answer.
I appreciate that. How many personnel are detailed to domestic agencies, such as DHS, to help protect domestic critical infrastructure? The 2018 MOU authorized 50 detailees. In 2020, DoD scaled it down to about 20, and as of last year, OIG report had only 10 filled. Obviously, we are trying to position ourselves to defend against any oncoming Russian cyber attacks, especially to the civilian sector. And as you know, about 80% of our cyber networks are civilian owned and operated. So I'd like to know what your perspective is on this and how we can create better collaboration so that Not only can DoD resources through the National Guard, but certainly NSA and other cyber security forces can be supportive of what we do to create cyber defense domestically.
Senator, what we have done, we began not only with the ability, as this committee has allowed us to generate up to 50 personnel, but I think the first thing that we wanted to do was make sure that we exchange liaison officers, which has been done now between ourselves and CISA. The second piece is focusing a part of my force on direct support to CISA. This is a discussion that Director Easterly and I have had. It's also the ability for us to look at and say, what are the areas that perhaps are unique for our force that might be available to CISA and the nation in the future? And the third piece is working very closely to better understand what are the competitive advantages that we might bring from U.S. Cybercommand to what is necessary for the defense of the critical infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General. And I'd like to work with you on creating a more formalized relationship between you and CISA for the future, because I know that the jointness efforts in New York City are among the best in the country. Currently, in our cyber protection with both assets from National Guard, NSA, NYPD, and FBI, we are collaborating now with over 50 entities that are deemed critical infrastructure, major banks, major supply chain, major energy, major water, and that is working extremely well. So also for the record, I'd be grateful for any thoughts you have on that collaboration, making sure it can become more robust and more formalized. I'd like your thoughts, if you have any today, but also for the record.
Let me take that for the record, Senator. I did have the opportunity yesterday to speak with Director Easterly. We were actually in the same location and had an opportunity to just go over some of these topics. So that'll be a apropos time.
Thank you. Thank you, General. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Senator Fisher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Clarke, Special Operations Forces have an indispensable and outsized role in counterterrorism operations. Would you agree that without sustained CT pressure, terrorist groups are more able to focus on planning and preparing for external attacks?
I would fundamentally agree, but I would also add that it's key to do that with allies and partners, because then you actually are able to expand and get a bigger bang for your buck.
As commander, you must be extensively familiar with challenges associated with conducting over-the-horizon CT operations, correct?
I am, Senator.
Can you describe the challenges of conducting over-the-horizon CT operations without reliable partners on the ground, without basing access in neighboring countries, and without reliable access to airspace?
Senator, it is more difficult, and I'm not going to sit in front of this committee and say that it is not. I would also, on the same hand, though, say that the last 20 years we have developed exquisite capabilities, and we can conduct counterterrorism missions over the horizon, and we have exhibited that in the past. The most important aspect from my purview, and I've witnessed this multiple times, and you're referencing it, is the intel collection that is associated to ensure that you have that intelligence to conduct those operations.
And we have been successful in the past, but have we been successful in the recent past, specifically in Afghanistan after we left?
Senator, I can point to a recent raid in Syria to show that we have had success, and we continue to observe and monitor in Afghanistan, along with Central Command and other intel agencies.
In this setting, can you say if we've had success in Afghanistan?
Senator, I think some of those questions best be served in a closed hearing.
Thank you. Secretary Maier, has there been progress made towards securing any basing agreements or arrangements with any country bordering Afghanistan?
Senator Fisher, there has been, but I'd prefer to talk about that in closed session due to the sensitivities.
Okay. Mr. Secretary, our current strategy for countering terrorist groups in Afghanistan assumes an immense amount of risk. I'm also deeply concerned by the lack of intelligence collection capabilities that we have for Afghanistan. In December, CENTCOM Commander General McKenzie stated that, quote, "We're probably at about 1 or 2% of the capabilities we once had to look into Afghanistan," end quote. Does the department plan to devote any additional resources to ISR in Afghanistan, or is the department comfortable with the current level of risk associated with the current ISR levels?
Senator, the department's looking actively right now at other forms of intelligence. I wouldn't limit it only to ISR, and there's other capabilities that I think can be surged, and that is an ongoing effort to look at those opportunities.
Will you be able to discuss those in a closed setting with us?
Senator, yes, I will be able to.
Thank you. General Clarke, for the better part of 2 decades, the counterterrorism fight has been your main effort in your command. The unclassified summary of the new National Defense Strategy clearly states that China is the pacing threat and de-emphasizes other persistent threats, including the threat from violent extremist organizations. How do you envision the demand signal from geographic combatant commanders changing given the shifting priorities under the new National Defense Strategy?
Senator, the demand for special operations forces will always exceed the capabilities that we can provide. But what we are doing is to ensure that we are developing and modernizing to provide unique capabilities such as undersea modernization, maritime mobility that could work very well inside the Indo-Pacific, and to do things that only SOF can do. We have recently stood up a Special Reconnaissance Enabling Command to look at our sensitive activities that can be applied globally.
In your written testimony, you talk about rebalancing the activities, and if, for the record, if you could explain how Special Operation Forces are realigning to support the priorities that are identified in that National Defense Strategy, please.
I will. I'll take that for the record,
Sir.
Senator.
And thank you so much for your service to this country.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Senator Hirono, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for testifying, and a special aloha and mahalo to General Clarke, as this may be the last time that you are appearing before this committee. Question for General Nakasone. In your prepared remarks, you note that one of your priorities is maintaining a skilled cyber workforce through recruitment, training, and retention. And we all know that that the recruitment and retention in this area is particularly important. We have a number of cyber education programs in Hawaii that work collaboratively with NSA and DHS, such as the National Center of Academic Excellence in Cyber Defense and Center of Academic Excellence in Research. However, we also struggle to retain these trained cybersecurity experts in Hawaii, where opportunities do exist. But yet, we are competing with the private sector, among other entities. Are you able to meet the demands of an ever-changing cyber landscape with the talent that you currently have? General Nakasone?
Senator, thank you. Very specifically, yes, right now, but we need to be postured for the future. To give you an example, we stood up at U.S. Cybercommand this year the Academic Engagement Network, over 92 universities across 40 different states, to include the University of Hawaii at Manoa, of which I've had the ability to go and actually talk there and talk with the students there. This is an incredibly important piece of what we do, because my sense is that as good as our technology is, it always comes back to people. And so our talent initiatives right now are focusing on being able to develop the next generation. And so while we have enough for today, our nation needs more for tomorrow.
I think it's a constant need, and so we have a situation where we need to recruit or encourage a lot more people into the STEM areas, wouldn't you say?
That's correct, Senator. In fact, we have a program with the National Science Foundation, Next Generation Cyber, that's being run by NSA and the National Science Foundation, of which we have camps every summer for K through 12, generating interest in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
And are you finding that you are able to recruit women or girls and minorities into these programs?
Senator, we are. However, again, I point to the fact that it's not enough, and we need to do better in the future. Right now, our force is 35% female in terms of our overall strength on the civilian side and about 20% on the military side. Overall, in the cybersecurity industry, it's a 20%. That's a very, very low number for our nation. And so I'm concerned about our command, our agency, and certainly our nation in this area.
So I think that whatever programs, educational programs that we have that would encourage more women and minorities into the STEM fields are important, wouldn't you say?
I agree, Senator. I think the other piece that I would add, being the son of two educators, is ensuring that the teachers, that we're able to bring this curriculum to the teachers that are so instrumental in being able to sow the foundation for the future.
I agree. I know that we have to do a heck of a lot more to encourage particularly women and minorities, because that is a vast, untapped group of individuals. Again, for you, it is likely that many of our military installations in the Pacific would be targeted in the event of conflict with China. And it's clear we need a flexible and resilient approach to logistics in the Pacific. In her testimony last week, General Van Overst, commander of U.S. Transcom, highlighted cybersecurity as a chief threat to her mission as it pertains to contested logistics, and highlighted partnerships with Cybercomm. In what ways has Cybercomm integrated with the Stratcom and Indo-PACOM regarding the vulnerability of our assets spread across the Pacific?
Two ways, Senator. First of all, being able to ensure that the network that U.S. Transportation Command utilizes, along with a series of private sector companies, this is an unclassified network, is resilient and assured in terms of being able to do that. We've had special focus on U.S. Transcom. The second piece is working with U.S. Transcom, U.S. Indo-PACOM, and other combatant commands to ensure that the partnerships that we have built in the Pacific and Europe are foundational to being able to ensure the cybersecurity of these nations as we continue to partner with them.
I do have a few more questions that I'll submit for the record, but I'd also like to join the chairman in expressing our congratulations to you, General Nakasone, for exposing Russia's aggressive intentions regarding Ukraine. That was very helpful to enable all of us to be much better prepared for this terrible war that is happening in the Ukraine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. I'll pass it on to my people.
Thank you, Senator Rono. Senator Rounds, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me begin by just saying, gentlemen, thank you for your service to our country. And General Clarke, to you and your team, what you have done over your years of service will make a difference in the safety and security for our country for years to come, and thank you. General Nakasone, my understanding is that the administration has launched an interagency review which could lead to revisions to the National Security Policy Memorandum Number 13, or NSPM 13. For my colleagues who may be unfamiliar with this document, the NSPM 13, along with NSPM 21, allows the delegation of well-defined authorities to the Secretary of Defense to conduct time-sensitive military operations in cyberspace. It is based on the idea of persistent engagement, which means continuously engaging and contesting adversaries in cyberspace. Now, recognizing that you have just talked about dual-hattedness and the fact that that has worked successfully, and I think you're absolutely correct with regard to the dual hat that you wear, would you share with us with regard to the cyber effects that you've been able to conduct? We've made a difference with NSPM 13 as well. Could you just share with us, before NSPM 13 was in effect, which came into effect after the first year or so of the Trump administration, but prior to that, how many cyber operation or cyber effect operations were conducted prior to that time in the previous 4 or 5 years?
Senator, I know of no effects operations that were conducted prior to 2018, but I would like to take that question just for the record to make sure that I look back since it's before my time.
Thank you. I think recognizing that we're in an unclassified setting, would it be fair to say that the number of these operations greatly increased after NSPM 13 went into effect?
Senator, two critical events took place in 2018. One was this committee allowing cyber to be a traditional military activity in the FY19 NDAA. The second piece, as you highlighted, was National Security Policy Memorandum 13.
So, be fair to say that the NSPM 13 would have been considered as playing an important role in enabling you to protect the 2018 and the 2020 elections, along with recognizing that it is now part of a traditional military activity?
That is correct, Senator.
How would you, if they were to change the NSPM 13 and the authorities that you have, is there a possibility that your capability to conduct cyber effects operations may be affected?
So certainly, Senator, we would take a look at any changes, obviously, and we will adjust to those changes. But significant changes to that NSPM, it could affect what we need to do.
Thank you. General Nakasone, the members under your command are highly trained technical experts. There is a high demand in the global market for their skill sets. I understand that the service components are responsible for recruiting and retaining these individuals, but their retention directly affects your ability to conduct operations. And Senator Manchin, as chair of the Cyber Subcommittee, and myself as ranking member, I know we're having a specific subcommittee discussion on that this afternoon, but in this open setting, I think it's critical to discuss the need about, number one, either the volume of individuals coming in, the ability to retain them for a longer period of time, but also when they come to you from the services, because they are theoretically supposed to be trained at the service level and then delivered to you for the operations, are they in a position today to be used directly in operations, or do you have to go through an extensive retraining or additional training of these individuals?
Senator, first of all, thanks to you and Senator Manchin for the hearing you're going to hold this afternoon. When I look at readiness, really three parts to the readiness with our cyber forces. First of all, what the services are responsible for. The man, train, and equip piece of that for 6,187 cyber warriors. Secondly, it's what we at U.S. Cybercommand, the National Security Agency, must do to provide additional training. This is above and beyond what someone would come into the service and need to be able to effective on our teams. And the third piece is, I think, the critical piece that you've highlighted, which is retention and the ability for our cyber warriors to continue to stay within our force. That's a shared mission between the service and U.S. Cyber Command. I take that very seriously. I've worked very closely with the service chiefs to make sure that all three of those areas are going to be balanced in the future. We have work to do.
So in other words, if you get them and they're not ready to go on the job day one, and you're training them, that takes time away from the time that they are then available for your use by a significant amount of time.
It does, but I would say, Senator, that there is a basic level that the services have to meet, and for the most part, they meet that all the time. It's us being able to do the advanced training that's so necessary for them to be effective as part of our teams.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Round. Senator Shaheen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and General Clarke, thank you so much for your service. Thank you all for testifying this morning. General Clarke, I know that the New York Times has pointed out that you all had been very involved in Ukraine, and we discussed this yesterday in terms of providing training to them that began in 2014. Can you talk about how important that has been in providing the expertise that we're now seeing on the battlefield in Ukraine?
Senator, I'd hit a few highlights. One is the competency towards the security force assistance, and specifically the high-end training that we did for the Ukrainian Special Operations Forces. But I would also highlight for the committee the military information support ops, or information warfare, that we had a dedicated team that was in the Ukraine for 8 years providing that. And that was everything from billboard to print to using internet-based capabilities, along with civil affairs teams that were working with them. And that it really, as we see today, the resistance that the Ukrainian forces have held and the training that they were given, I think, is directly contributed to the success on the battlefield today.
Thank you. And you mentioned the importance of the information warfare that has occurred there, and clearly Ukraine has been masterful at what they've been doing. Of course, Putin also has done a good job in preventing his citizens in Russia from knowing what's actually going on the battlefield. So can you talk a little bit about whether we should develop, or maybe we already have, a gray zone strategy to encompass that kind of information warfare as we're looking at particular conflict areas around the world?
Senator, you're pointing at a really key factor, and yes, we have already begun this in coordination with ASD Solic and truthfully with Cybercommand, where much of the delivery of information resides. It is critical, and I would say we already have the authorities in many cases to conduct information operations. We just have to make sure that they are in fact directed at the right audiences, and that we work very closely with our Department of State colleagues and the interagency so that we're delivering proper effects at the right point in time.
Thank you. And General Nakasone, what's Cybercom's role in defending the homeland from foreign cyber threats beyond just the critical infrastructure protection? And how are you working with public and private partners to protect the country? As we've looked at the potential for the Russian government to attack our critical infrastructure, and we still are concerned that that might happen.
Senator,
what are you doing?
Senator, it begins outside the United States where my authorities rest, and that's through a series of persistent engagement campaigns against malicious cyber actors that intend to do our nation harm. With the National Security Agency being able to release that information. So when we do a hunt forward operation in a specific country, being able to understand the tradecraft and the malware, and then releasing it publicly provides an antidote to what they might do. And then within the United States, working closely in support of Department of Homeland Security and CISA, providing them any assistance that they need in terms of capacity or capabilities.
Thank you. Mr. Maier, one of the things that we've seen, and you mentioned this in your opening statement, you talked about the effort to encourage more women to join SOF. And we have seen in Afghanistan with the female tactical platoon, in Syria with the women's protection units. We're now seeing in Ukraine the important role that women are playing in conflicts, and they're actually getting more attention today than they were in years past. So can you talk about what we're doing to work with our international partners to highlight the role of women and make sure that they have the attention and support they need when we're working in an area?
Senator, I think we concretely say that women in SOF are an operational imperative because of the ability to do some of the things you described in your question. It's critically important, and especially some of the areas we've traditionally worked, to be able to have women that are operators or have exquisite skills go to areas to be able to gather information that frankly men can't go, or have a different outreach capability to different parts of communities. And I think as we look towards a future fight, whether it's against gray zone competitors and non-state actors or state actors, we're going to need that capability. It's a force multiplier, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. Senator Ernst, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and gentlemen, thank you very much for your service to our country. General Clarke, to you and Suzanne, and Chief Smith, to you and Tina, thank you very much for your collaborative effort in supporting our SOF warriors and their teams. There's no doubt that our Special Operations Forces are the most capable of military elements on the globe, and of course our cyber forces, General Nakasone, are essential to the defense of this nation. And we have to ensure that both of these elements are fully resourced and modernized to defeat the current threats to our national security. So General Clarke, health of the force is the fifth pillar in your command, and it ties into directly the first soft truth, which is humans are more important than hardware. I think we all believe that. And I, like you, want to make sure that we're providing our service members with the best care possible. So can you talk through SOCOM's efforts focused on brain and behavioral health for our service members, and of course for their loved ones as well?
Hey, thank you, Senator. Our people are our most precious resource, and we got to put the resources behind that to ensure they're taken care of. Specifically, the Brain Health Initiative, falling within the preservation of the force and family, is one of the critical things we do. We focused initially on the physical domain because that's what you could see. But what we were finding is through the invisible wounds that some of our warriors might, TBI, multiple explosions, multiple breaches, and proximity to those explosions is having an impact. And so we are working very closely. I recently went up with Chief Greg Smith up to Boston, where we were working with Mass General and a couple academic departments and universities up there to look at how we can do imaging that previously we could not do except on a cadaver. And this may be groundbreaking for us to be able to determine beforehand what some of our operators may be going through. And so, as you are well aware, we stood up an additional pillar within our preservation of the force and family, specifically towards the cognitive domain, because we realize that this is the most important part for our people is their what's inside their brain housing group, that they can make the right decisions, and it affects everything they do. So we're going to continue working to improve our operators and their families' lives.
I appreciate that, sir. So important. And you brought up the preservation of the force and family, as did ASD Solek Maier. But how can we take this program and sustain improvements in how our military approaches sustaining those SOF operators? Again, just focused on POTF. How do we sustain and improve?
So the key for us is the sustained funding that we need in order to do that. We have many, and most of that funding actually attributes to the people that we have to support the preservation of the force and family program.
Thank you. And just very briefly as well, I want to talk a little bit about your operational posture, General Clarke. So I am frustrated by a number of mobilizations within terror networks, whether it's Russia and China across Africa, what we see in South America, Eastern Europe, all these hot zone conflicts that are currently ongoing. What does supporting your unfunded requirement list, or what I like to think of as a risk assessment list, buy us in these particular theaters?
Senator, what it provides us, if we find support for the unfunded, it buys down risk because we are able to modernize faster, and then we are also to ensure readiness, that we are placing the appropriate dollars towards those unfunded requirements. We'll buy some of that back.
And for me, Mr. Chair, that's extremely important that we're able to focus on these unfunded requirements because they are so important within the area of SOCOM and making sure that we are taking one of our smallest, most agile elements and being able to use them as a force multiplier. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for being here today.
Thank you very much, Senator Ernst. The vote has commenced, and as I indicated at the beginning of the hearing, and with the concurrence of Senator Inhofe, we will recess for approximately 10 minutes. We'll rejoin the hearing at the call of the chair, but approximately 10 minutes so we can accomplish this vote and then get on with the hearing. The committee stands in recess.